there's no news. Or at least this week's news sucks. So kick back, play some more Tears of the Kingdom, Diablo 4, whatever flavor you choose, and listen to us as we talk about our past in gaming and what we think makes us qualified to tell you what to play.
I'm Nick, and I'm so old I remember a time before Tetris's Tetronymos weren't made out of sand.
Hi, I'm Josh, and video games were only a problem until they kept your kids quiet.
And my name is Andy. This is Video Game Tango.
Mouth noises.
Yeah, who mouth noises?
That was me. That was me. Dry mouthing it.
So, as far as gaming news this week,
Games don't exist.
yeah, it sucks. Hey, cool. Diablo 4 is coming out. Okay.
Breath of the Wild exists.
That's
Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, those both statements are true.
That is true. I am actually playing a lot of Breath of the Wild right now. Well, not this very second, but like earlier today. So I can get caught up and play Tears of the Kingdom. But yeah, so those are dominating the news cycle. We just got done with PlayStation Showcase last week. We have the Xbox Showcase coming up. That's also the Starfield Showcase. We're going to have Steam Next Fest coming up soon. We've got it's like the Cozy Games special coming up. There's like a lot of gaming expos happening because E3 didn't happen this year. Yeah, because E3 didn't happen this year, so everybody's doing their own thing.
Yep.
Again. And we're in the middle of all of it. The unfortunate thing is like PlayStation Showcase happened like 2 weeks earlier than everything else. So we have like this week and next week. There's not going to be a whole lot of gaming news unless we get surprised next week with something. So rather than give you guys kind of like the update on Activision Blizzard, which we will get to eventually, and
Everyone is slathering
for sure, and like, you know, news that we're not interested in. Because if we're not interested in, we assume that you guys, while you may be interested in the topic, conveying something that we're uninterested in an interesting way, we just don't want to do that. That feels fakey, non-genuine. And yeah, we just that's not our jam usually. We want to talk about things that interest us. Hopefully that interests you,
Way
or at
more
least
of a compote than a jam.
precisely. I couldn't have said it better. We want to do something a little bit different. So I was thinking earlier, like what's something that we haven't done that we probably should have? And I figured, hey, like, why don't we introduce ourselves in a long form? Because obviously we give you guys the intro every week. Hi, my name is Josh, and I do a funny thing.
That's generally true.
Yeah. But otherwise, like, we haven't talked a whole lot about ourselves. Now, Balcony Time is a little bit different. If you listen to the Balcony Time podcast, we talk about ourselves a little bit more and like stuff in our day to day. But as far as like going back and talking about like what are our credentials, what got us into gaming, what's our background as far as video game goes?
Why should you even listen to us?
Exactly. So we kind of wanted to discuss that with you guys today and take a trip down memory lane, talk about our past in gaming, talk about what brought us to where we are now as a premier video game podcast. Why are you pointing at me?
The only...
They should listen to you. Because it's the best damn podcast in town.
That's right.
It is. All that preamble to tell you this entire podcast is going to be about Superman 64.
Thank God. It's about time somebody gave it its dues.
Exactly.
So I guess I'll just start. I started gaming at a really young age, and that is mostly thanks to this guy, Nick, over here.
You're welcome.
You're
welcome.
It wasn't like my first introduction to gaming. I had done a little bit, but I was so young at the time. You know, when I met Nick, I was like 3, maybe 4 years. Like
He was wearing diapers.
I was wearing diapers. I was like 3, right? So I was like in training diapers, and
He's
like
prepping for his gaming days.
pretty much. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was way ahead for World of Warcraft, and yeah, eventually this guy moved in next door to my grandma's house, and going over to Nick's house was a mainstay of my childhood, so we could play video games. And at the time, you know, Nick had an SNES, which like nobody I knew had.
Cutting edge.
You know, this was at the time where like the NES games were still being made. SNES had been out for a while, and SNES games were being made simultaneously with NES games. This was just, you know, a couple of years before PlayStation, so really got to cut my teeth on some of history's like biggest games. And that was all, thanks to this guy and his family, who, is like my second family. His mom is I'm as close to his mom as I am my own. So that's kind of where things started for me, was like NES, SNES days with Nick, getting into I remember really formatively, I was 3, so you were 5. Probably just getting into Doom, like the shareware Doom, right?
I got my first computer, I believe, at the age of 7 or 8.
Okay.
So it was just a year or two after we had started.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a old, it was a 486 or a Hewlett Packard. I don't remember. It was an old computer.
You had a 486, yeah. I remember because you had the turbo button.
I think the Hewlett Packard was the second computer I had. Yeah. The turbo button, the mysterious button that no one knows what it did, but when you press it, it made noises.
Well, the turbo button, funny enough, it's a tangent here. Turbo button actually slowed down the clock of the 486 to the 386 because a lot of games were coded for their FPS for each frame to be shown by the clock of the CPU. So if you upgraded to 486, the game would go too fast.
Yeah.
So turbo button actually slowed your processor down. Yeah.
Obrut.
That's the one. The Obrut button.
Obrut.
So that's kind of where I got started. Early games, Nick and I played a lot of Link to the Past. I got super fucking hooked on Mega Man X. That's the game. When I went over to Nick's house, I wanted to play some Mega Man X.
Fucking masterpiece.
Perfect game. What are some of your earliest gaming memories?
Oh, dude, that Misty fucking mountain. So my earliest memory, I was 4 years old.
Ironically, no.
Yeah.
No.
That's an early one.
I mean, my parents didn't hate me that much. I was given a Game Boy, the original Game Boy, when I was 4 as a Christmas present. By given, I mean my mom and her aunt pitched in to buy it. And then within 5 minutes of me opening it, my grandma and my aunt took it from me to play Tetris.
Yeah, of course.
And they proceeded to play it for 4 hours while I watched. Start with the Game Boy, and then I had a Nintendo. And then the Super Nintendo, the computer came along. And it is hard to find the words for someone formerly, but still gifted child who's now failed at life, who has been able to experience a world of games from their, I wouldn't say nascency, because this is early 90s, right? Games have been around a while. But the golden age of video games is arguably the 90s. And we grew up relatively poor in a mildly backwater city, in a mildly backwater part of a state that was not with the times. We didn't grow up in a metropolitan area.
Yeah.
We didn't have music venues. We didn't go to shows. I mean, 99% of my vacations were camping in a tent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
100% of my vacations were camping in a tent.
Yeah. So games allowed for this, this meshing alongside books to explore a world outside of Southern Oregon to a child who, it was just too much. Games back then, you chase that dragon of wanting to experience games like you did when you were a kid. When I remember so vividly playing Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, and there's a mountain on the top side of the world map that you can get to, and you climb to the very top using the background layers. There's a forest way back behind the mountain with fog over it. And I would just look at it and just slather at the idea of getting to explore what that forest is because it was inaccessible. It was just an image, right? But not to me as a kid.
That was a world.
That was a whole world that existed. And that notion carried me forward into gaming. The idea that you're getting to explore other people's minds and their imaginations. And yeah, I mean, we got lucky, being able to have, I didn't have any other hobbies. So when it came to getting me gifts, besides books, and I mean, I wasn't into comics. You don't have to pay for TV shows in the 90s. So it was video games, We had Mega Man, and we had Zelda, and we had shooters, and we had puzzle games. And, I was lucky enough to have a wide variety of really solid games growing up to form a basis around. And then it wasn't too much longer that I met you. We were, 12, 11, 7th grade. And at that time, that would have been 1998, 1999, right at the climax of the golden age of games,
Yeah.
you know, the Final Fantasies and the Metal Gear Solids and everything that came out right there before 2000. And I don't remember too much talk about video games with you, Josh, but then again, my memory's a terrible thing. At the time, what were you playing around that time?
So when I was a child, most of my video games came. I remember like the first time I played video games, it was in my mother's mom's, like my grandma, like they got it presumably to keep me quiet for a few hours. And I just remember playing the first Mario and just I played it on a TV. Now, this was a TV so old, the thing could be in a different shape. It wasn't square.
Yeah.
Like, it could be a different shaped thing. It was
They were
round.
deeper than they were wide.
It was round and pastel yellow, and it had dials on it. I can very specifically remember my feet kicking because, like, I'm not tall enough to reach the bottom of, like, the floor. And just playing Mario for hours and hours and hours. And then my other grandma, my dad's mom, I guess not to be outdone, because I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when I was a child. Not to be outdone, she also got a Nintendo. And then I remember like just playing games. That was some of my favorite times, was playing games like Bobble Bobble. It was like this two stupid lizards, and like the point is to trap things and you could ride it in the bubbles. I played that shit for hours with my grandma. And Duck Hunt. I fucking hate that dog. To this fucking day, I hate that dog. But then my first, because those were my grandparents. Like I could only play when I was over there and whatnot. But my first gaming, system would have been the Super Nintendo. Like I got it for Christmas. It was like 1994, 1995, somewhere right in there. I like just about shit my pants because it came with Donkey Kong.
Oh yeah,
No, let me tell you,
Donkey Kong Country.
nothing fucking hits like Donkey Kong, playing like Donkey Kong Country the first time.
Yeah.
Like that's like, and I can't recapture it now because I don't have like any of the original gear or any of that stuff, and I'm not a child, and like emulating it on my phone is not the same. It just like I'm not playing with Super Nintendo. It's not the same. But like
It hit different when you were 6.
it
you know?
did, man. It fucking did. Yeah. So Donkey Kong was like my favorite. Like I'd play that all the fucking time. I play Mario Kart a lot. And then like gaming, but gaming wasn't a thing that I was really, it was always like an extra treat, you know,
Yeah.
like if I was a good boy and made it through my day without arbitrarily pissing off my parents, then I got to play video games for a couple of hours. Then I got a Nintendo 6, like I got a Game Boy, and I was able to be more autonomous with my gaming. But like the Game Boy really didn't do anything for me until Pokemon came out. And like, so for me, I feel like, especially in my youth, there's these like milestones and hallmarks where like gaming was very important to me.
Yeah.
But then I was also like, my dad would be like, well, you're inside too often. Go outside. And, you know, shit like that. And reading, same thing with reading. He'd be like, oh, you're reading books too often.
Can't have that.
Like, can't have that. But, yeah, so like Donkey Kong, the Super Nintendo, big hallmark, big milestone. Then like Pokemon would be the next one. And then after that, probably like fucking Halo or Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 3 was the next like big one where I was like, I played it and I was like, holy shit, this is video games, man.
Yeah. Major leap.
I want to go back in time a little bit before like 2003. So, you know, while in my formative years, it was spent over with Nick. When I turned 5, my grandma did buy me an NES. Now, this is the last time I ever was gifted a video game or a console ever. The first and last time. My parents and my family just did not believe in playing video games. They didn't mind that I did it, but they were never. I mean, like we all grew up poor, but my parents, they like, it was to the point where it was either we buy him video games or we keep the heat on, and sometimes we still couldn't keep the heat on. So you know, it was never going to be a possibility that my parents were going to feed into my video gaming habits. there were always workarounds, and I'll get to that here shortly. But my grandma did buy me the NES with the Zapper. She also bought a few games on top of that. She went to some, because we didn't have like a big gaming store or anything like that.
Yeah,
here
this
at the
didn't
time.
exist.
No, we had
That was the shit you saw on TV.
We got Toys R Us a few years after this,
Yeah.
so you could walk into a store and buy video games. But no, we had rental stores, and there were small, mom and pop shops for video games.
What you would call boutiques nowadays.
Yeah. And I remember specifically there was one right over here, happens to be like right next to where I live, next to a place called G.I. Joe's. And G.I. Joe's was like a sporting goods store. And my grandma was in that shopping center when she thought, I'll go check out this video game thing that Andrew keeps talking about. And decided for Christmas or for my birthday that I was going to get an NES. She got me the Zapper. It came with Mario and Duck Hunt. And she also got me a game called Legacy of the Wizard, and a baseball game called Bases Loaded 3. I loved Mario. I loved Duck Hunt, but Legacy of the Wizard, dude, as a 5-year-old, it was a game that you really couldn't understand. It was a very early action RPG. It was a side scroller, but it had RPG elements. Like you got level progression, and you had stores where you could buy and sell items. And for the time, relatively complex game. Played a lot of that, really not understanding what I was doing. But I mean,
oh yeah, there was a lot of that growing up.
But I played that game until I was probably, because I'd go back to my NES, despite having newer consoles later on. I would go back to my NES and play more Legacy of the Wizard. And eventually, by the time I was 10 or 11, at that time, I had played more complex RPGs and more complex side scrollers, and really started to get into it. That game was incredible for its time. Legacy of the Wizard was so fucking good. So I'm glad that was like a formative game for me. Later on, I did get an SNES, and that goes into how I procured my games later. Like I said, I was never gifted another console. I was never gifted another game again after this, at least not from my family. It was always, my dad would always set up something with me. He'd say, if you can get $100 for this thing, I'll pay the rest. Or, over the summer, if you can buy the console, I'll get you a game. And that was the deal with the PlayStation. Yeah. That was the deal with the N64. So, I'd raise money during the summer, mowing lawns, going door to door, asking for people for their cans. And I'd walk the cans down to a place called the Country Store, turn in the cans. I'd keep the change. Might buy a Tootsie Roll or whatever, but I was really kind of conservative with my money because it was meant for something. So, if I got $100 at the end of the summer, the end of the summer always coincided with my birthday. So August 5th is my birthday. Next month we're going back to school. So that was the end of the summer for me. And if by then I had raised enough money, my dad would do the thing. So like SNES, I got my SNES, and my dad got me as a surprise Donkey Kong Country 3 on top of the game that I'd requested, which was Mega Man X, which I'd already played the bejesus out of with Nick, but like still one of my favorite games to this day. One of the games that I go back to at least once a year and beat. Absolute favorite. And then the next was the N64.
Yeah.
Which I had like a full on. We actually showed pictures of that for the live stream. My sister shared those. I showed pictures of me holding my Nintendo 64 in 1999 for my birthday. That was another thing. That was the same thing. I had to buy the console, but then Dad got me The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Which had just come out, like actual brand new game this time. It wasn't a game that was 2 years old, bargain bin kind of thing.
Yeah.
They got me a brand new game.
And that ties into something that, like, before we leave the subject of ancient history, that I really wish I could impart to newer generations is the idea of discovery.
Yeah.
So two things come to mind. One, which I haven't thought about in a million years, and two, which was on my mind. The first one is that we had some family friends that were ultra rich, like owning horses rich. I think my mom worked with them at the police station or something. I don't remember the specifics, but they had like a second living room, and they had a wall of NES games, like over 100. And every time we'd go over there, which was as often as I could get my parents to go visit so they could chat for hours as parents did back then.
Yeah.
I could just grab any game off the shelf and play it. And I specifically remember playing A Boy and His Blob and the Jaws Nintendo game. Right.
That Jaws game sucked.
That Jaws game sucked. I fucking beat it though because I could go over there enough. But the Discovery thing, I had a cousin. Everybody had a cousin back then. Like maybe you had the cousin that had the Jaguar or the 3DFX or some fancy console.
Or the fucking Virtual Boy.
Or the Virtual
That
Boy.
was me.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I had a cousin who had an NES. And at the time, I was probably 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. So it was a little bit older, but he had games I hadn't played before. And we'd go through the same handful of games. And he had one game where the cover, the picture art on the cartridge had been ripped off. And you need to know that in these days, you didn't know what a game was.
Yeah.
Like the cover art and the box art on the boxes, unless they showed a screenshot of the game, it very rarely coincided with what the game was about, right?
Strangely enough, it did
So
very rarely.
We had this mystery cartridge that wouldn't work. And we tried all the tricks. And these are tricks that you hear through just people. There was no internet. You know, spit on it, blow on it, rub a coin on it, use a Q-tip.
Jimmy said this would work.
Yeah. We eventually got it to work. And I load this game up. And you start in this town and you get to make this group of characters and we're going out and it's this turn-based battle system and we finally get playing it and like, this is pretty cool. And we get 3 hours in and then the splash screen hit. And I remember thinking like, this game hasn't even started yet.
Yeah.
And as the splash screen is coming down, it says Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
At the time, never heard of it. Right. But like the idea that I was 3 hours into a game and it hadn't even begun yet.
Yeah.
That's the kind of like discovery moments that with the internet nowadays you don't get. And those are very fucking formative moments.
Here's the thing is, so I remember very, very much you telling me about this game. And because you didn't get the splash screen until you kill the first boss. You have
You
to
had
kill
to go all the way to the dungeon
Garnet?
and fight Garland. Yeah.
Garland, yeah.
Yeah. In that first dungeon.
Yeah. So, and I remember you like, I remember vividly you describing this to me regularly. And how
'Cause it
cool
was
of
amazing.
Because it was an incredible experience. So eventually I got $15 together and we went to the little fucking ramshackle place next to G.I. Joe's.
Oh, did we?
And I got Final Fantasy. Yeah.
Okay.
Final Fantasy was like the third game I ever owned or fourth game that I ever owned. I don't consider Bases Loaded 3 my game. That was my dad's game.
Yeah, your dad loved baseball.
My
games.
dad played the shit out of Bases Loaded 3. So yeah, I picked up Final Fantasy and I was too young. I was definitely too young to be playing
those
Final
games
Fantasy.
are, they teach you a lot, but they were not easy, right? No. They were not coded with
And
like
there's no
player
tutorial.
experience in mind. No,
No, and
This
I didn't
is-
get the book.
Yeah.
Because I bought it just cartridge. I didn't buy the box game.
And then, that leads into our more formative years, pubescent teenage times when shit like GameFAQs comes out, which was like the fucking mind-blowing thing that was GameFAQs, all this like ASCII art and people writing entire walkthroughs and tutorials. Andy had his own website.
It's like
for
the fucking
Final
Ark
Fantasy.
of the Covenant of of gaming.
Just remember, I was told by a moderator of GameFAQs that I had what was it? It was the it's on the tip of my tongue. I have the
Guide of the Year or something.
he gave me some kind of accolade, the definitive. He called it the definitive Final Fantasy VII walkthrough.
Yeah, Andy had an entire, was it Angel Fire or GeoCities?
It was GeoCities. I had a GeoCities
An
website.
entire website devoted to a walkthrough of Final Fantasy.
And it was ff7heaven.za.au. Yeah. Because it was a free domain.
Free domain.
I figured it out. Not only did I did I used GeoCities Site Builder quite a bit, but I also learned HTML specifically for Final Fantasy VII Heaven and my Diablo 2 or my Diablo website.
Yeah.
Which hellfire.ra.au or whatever that one was. I owned that for a little while too, and that one didn't get off the ground like FF7 Heaven did. But I had tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people, because you used to have the little site tickers.
Yeah, you keep track of how many people came to your site.
You
right?
also used to have a guest book.
Yeah,
I had a guest book on the front page.
You joined a bunch of web rings to try to get traffic through your site.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I had tens of thousands of people in the guest book and hundreds of thousands of page views. And that's where I initially had published my walkthrough, but eventually made it to GameFAQs and became the definitive Final Fantasy VII walkthrough.
And that leads into like PC history, which Andy and I had, but Josh missed up until recently.
Yeah, no, I just recently joined the
Yeah. And
The
I always
class of PC gamer.
we were talking about dads. Like my dad was the kind of guy that he parented by providing money.
Yeah.
So the last real time that I've ever done anything with my dad for more than an hour was just him and I was Zelda 64 because I found the fishing mini game and he saw that and it blew his fucking mind that you could fish in a game.
Like, wait, you can fish?
And he was so pissed that there wasn't haptic feedback on the controller that he almost stopped, but he couldn't because he's discovering fishing in video games. So I sat there just excitedly watching my dad play the fishing for Zelda, right? But I bring that up because I did have consoles and I kept console games because you had these specifics. You can Metal Gear Solids on the PlayStation and then we had Halo on the Xbox. But PC gaming you added a dimension. It goes from 2D to 3D, right? Suddenly you have the internet where you can find, demo discs and DOS games and forums of people talking about stuff. And the old AOL 2.0 Kid Zone with Flash games before they were Flash games.
Yeah.
And I was just inundated with games of every type and variety. I mean, my babysitter had a Mac. I had the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, and then we got a PC. So I had everything available to me. And probably between the ages of 10 and 14, any game I could get my hands on. I played so many. But as the group, that's kind of when the group started coming together, 13, 14, 15. I think our first major thing, we had GTA, like Colin had that, but Halo was really the first time that brought everyone together.
Oh yeah. So we'll come back to Halo real quick. Before we get there, I do want to say that as far as formative gameplay and like playing with your family goes, Ocarina of Time was the same thing for me. It wasn't fishing with my dad. It was playing something with my mom, who had never shown any interest. My dad played some games. Like
I don't think I ever played a game with my mom. It's funny.
He had bought a Sega from a friend that was he had a friend that was big into drugs. So the guy ended up selling him his Sega Genesis to make rent once. Yeah. So he got a Sega Genesis for cheap with a bunch of games. I thought
it was so cool.
Dude,
You had a Sega.
Dude, not only did I have the Sega, I had the 32X expansion.
Yeah.
Like I nearly had the Tower of Power. The only thing I didn't have was the disc expansion pack. But so that was super cool. But yeah, we played Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles, and then that thing was so cool. The
Sonic and Knuckles game, it opened up. And you could put the other cartridge into the fucking game and play as Knuckles in the other game.
In Sonic 2 and 3. It was mind-blowing.
Dude, oh my God. Oh my God!
So
yes, sir.
My dad played a little bit of Genesis. Like it was mostly there was a baseball game that he was playing on there. He experimented with some of the Sonic and stuff too, because he bought them, so he's gonna play them.
He's got to play 'em.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did a little bit of that, but he always went back to his baseball game. Mom though, she would ride Epona for hours.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she was so excited, and she would hand the controller back to me when a Southos or something knocked her off the fucking horse, and she was really mad. She's like, well, I would just want a game where I ride a horse. But yeah, that's ultimately what that turned into. It was.
There's a distinct lack of horse riding games.
There is.
Where horse riding is. I mean, you got Red Dead,
thing,
right, and Breath of the Wild, but
you're gonna get shot off your horse at some point.
Is there like Horse Girl 2023?
I'm sure there's plenty of them. There's actually plenty of horse simulators.
Okay. For me, the Nintendo 64 actually was like a family gaming thing. That's like the thing I remember my mom playing video games with. Like my mom, my dad, my sister, and I would play like fucking Mario Party all the goddamn time, or Mario Kart to some degree. And that was one of the few things we did as a full on family was play some video games occasionally. So that was always kind of cool. But that was the Nintendo 64. But then after that, like PlayStation 2, Xbox, so on and so forth, that became very much a solo endeavor.
But that's also when you really started to play games.
Yeah, that was really the.
And you remember at this time, like multiplayer if it existed, it was local co-op only.
Always couch co-op.
Like Dreamcast was there way ahead of his time. My cousin had one, and he lived with us for like 2 months, and I got to see him burning bootleg copies of the game. It was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
I thought PCs were cool. This guy is copying free games from the internet onto his CD because his Dreamcast had the internet.
Your cousin.
Was like, yeah, Rob, the oldest one.
He was the coolest person I'd ever met at that point.
I did. He's like 11, 12 years older than us.
Yeah.
And like, I just watch him do this process. It was that fascinating. It was the
Over
coolest thing.
dial up on the Dreamcast.
But other than
coolest
that,
fucking thing.
90% of the games was single player. So because we're all young, you played them in parallel. We all played Pokemon and we hung out together playing it, but they're still single player games, right? So the idea of like a family gaming, like Mario Kart, Mario Party, that was in vogue is local co-op playing together.
Yeah.
And that's why I bitch so much nowadays about fucking couch co-op and local co-op not being a thing, because it's existed for 40 goddamn years.
It's the last time Nintendo was ahead of the game.
Or dude, you had to take turns.
Yeah,
which
turns.
which
Oh
you
my
and I
God.
were very good at. Like before you got your computer, because when you got your computer, that was a game changer. That meant one of us could be playing Diablo and the other one could be playing San Andreas, right? Because that's how we used to play games. Was like. Before you got your good gaming PC in like our early teens, I remember like when you got your PS2, that was another game changer. Playing Dark Cloud early on.
See, it's weird. I have very little memories of me playing at my house, but I remember you having your gateway in your dining room, and I remember us playing on that.
That's
and
weird because we played so much more at your house.
I did. Yes, memory gone.
Yeah, because so when you got San Andreas, I still didn't have a PS2 yet.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So like when you picked up San Andreas, I remember I played San Andreas all day, and then I would go to sleep. Like you'd sleep during my gameplay session, and then when you woke up, it was like your turn.
I kind of remember that. We would just like sleep in game. We'd sleep in game. Yeah.
I'd spend all summer at Nick's house, and we would take turns, like literal 8-hour turns between each other, playing these games. Sometimes, Fable was like I almost got kicked out of school because of Fable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So turn of the millennia, 2000. There was so much to offer. Blizzard had all their games on PC, and we had all the console games, and we just played individual stuff. But we still had a pretty rounded experience because luckily our group of friends was very tight knit.
Yes.
And we spent a lot of time just hanging out,
Yes.
and we still read. But and in that time around high schools when we started getting into D&D. But yeah, as far as formative experiences go, I got lucky in that I had the entire world of games offered to me. I played anything I could get my hands on. I was just talking on the balcony that I crunched numbers, and I've probably played over about 5,000 games in my life. And it's a lot. And that has a big impact on the kind of games I like now, because I've had decades to experience what games have to offer, and you start seeing a lot of patterns, and you start seeing kind of the game behind the game. So that's why I bitch so much about recent podcasts and where games are going, because they have transferred from, essentially an experience and an art form into a way to make money.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And then, so to talk about like, other than waxing poetic over, times past, I have played significantly fewer games than Nick. I would say probably like, half or less, probably. And that's because
You would mainline games, though. You'd find a game you liked and you played the shit out of it.
Yes, that's true. I'm very much like a completionist. Even if there's no end to a game, I'm a completionist. I have to have done everything in the games that I play. Like right now, I'm 100%ing Breath of the Wild. I am, and I know that's a big undertaking, but in 70 hours, I have 15 shrines left and only like 100 Koroks left.
Only 100 Koroks?
Dude, yeah. But I'm like 16 hearts in, like I am 100%ing Breath of the Wild. It's totally happening. I unfortunately haven't been logging everything that I've done, so I am going to get to a point where I have 1% of the game left and I have to fucking find it.
Figure out what you need to do.
But I'll get there when I get there. That said, I've played significantly fewer games than Nick has, but I have also been closer, I think, to the industry in some regards. And that's where I think a lot of my strength lies, is paying attention to what's going on inside the gaming industry. Let's talk about like World of Warcraft. That was my main game for literally 17 years.
Yeah.
I played other games during, but that was what I returned to literally every day. So it was an everyday login experience for that amount of time. And I had some little breaks and whatever, but World of Warcraft was the main. And I got very, very heavily into it, to the point where we were looking at corporate sponsorship during Wrath of the Lich King. At that time, I made a lot of friends, not only just like in World of Warcraft, but in the industry as well. I had loose ties to Gamebreaker TV at the time. That's AKA Mike B, Gary Gannon, for anybody that knows what that is. I used to submit articles for Wowhead that would get published.
Wowhead.
It still exists. It's just, it's Zam now. I had, I made get more definitive guides to playing mage in World of Warcraft because I was the world's highest damage output mage for a considerable amount of time, like nearly a year, because of the Wrath of the Lich King patch just happened to last almost a year. So during that time, I was the world's most powerful mage, and
It's pretty wizard.
and I was ahead on theory crafting. I mean, before we had item level and stuff like that, I was working in Excel sheets to optimize my damage output, right? I had all of the gear because our progression in our guild was so good. Again, we were looking at potential corporate sponsorships. I started streaming at the time. That's where I got my first few thousand followers. That was on, I always think it's Angel Fire. It wasn't on Angel Fire. I only streamed to it for a little while. It was Fire something. Anyways, it was pre-Twitch. It was pre-Justin TV. I did transfer eventually to Justin TV, and that account has existed since Justin TV. My current handle on Twitch is the Oleander. I have a day one Twitch account because I've transferred it from Justin TV to Twitch. I've been twitching. I've been twitching since Twitch existed, or since before it existed. So I would consider myself to have at least some pedigree. Because I've had my ear to the ground for so long. That's also why I talk so much about Activision Blizzard, is because I have followed that for 20 plus years now at this point.
The majority of your lifetime.
Yeah. And all the little intricacies. Like when I talk about people specifically in the company, these are people that I've been following their Twitter accounts since Twitter started, Yeah. So that I always find interesting. And I know I like to shit on Activision Blizzard, but I also have to give them credit where credit's due, is they did entertain me for thousands of hours. I have multiple characters on World of Warcraft that have more than a year's played time. So a little credit there. That said, let's move on to Josh. What makes you uniquely qualified to be on Video Game Tango?
I know what it is if you don't.
He's got the magic.
I got a little bit of magic, but I feel like I think I described it earlier as like a Joe six-pack of video games. I feel like I'm very much like the average, maybe like slightly above now, but very much the average consumer of video games. There was games across all genres that I like to play. If Star Wars was in it, that's probably going to give it a go. But I enjoyed playing things like Fable right alongside playing a dumbass racing game, or generally it's going to be I used to play a lot of EA Sports games. Mm-hmm. So anything from racing to football, not soccer. I used to enjoy
this is not a soccer household.
Yeah, it's not a soccer household. Adventure games were always fun, shooters, right? So, but it was always the big titles. I used to get a Game Informer when I was a teenager.
Oh God, the magazines. I forgot about the magazines.
I could talk about those all day.
So I used to get Game Informer. So that was when that would come out, I'd be like, all right, what do I have to look forward to? So generally, I look forward to a Rockstar game.
Yeah.
And I looked forward to the next iteration of like when Fable came out. I was like, man, Fable 2 is going to be great. They'll finally have everything that the first one said it was going to have.
I'm gonna love this dog.
Yeah. But then I think, it was a lot of, then there was a lot of story. Like I played GTA 5 forever. I played that game so many times. And then I played the Red Deads, but I would go through what I would call like phases of gaming, but it was always like a story driven kind of thing, right?
Not necessarily.
A lot of times, like a lot of the phases, like when we were doing multiplayer stuff, like your Left 4 Deads or your Halos, sure, absolutely gaming with the guys. But like in my own time, gaming was always more like I would hit like a high where I'd be like, okay, dude, I'm gonna play the shit out of fucking Red Dead for the next 3 months, and then I'm not gonna pick up my Xbox controller again for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I played a game called Overwatch, and everything like I went from like, having where I play games every day for, like I said, a few weeks to I played not only games every day, but I met like Wonka on there. Like one day we ran into each other and we've talked almost every day since then. Like I used to have this entire group of people that I'd like, some of them I didn't even know what they looked like because they didn't even have a Facebook or whatever. And it was just that was like my first time being like, man, I wonder if this dude I've never met and don't have his phone, I wonder when he's getting on.
Yeah.
And like,
Telling me.
and it was like the first game, like I guess Overwatch was like, besides something like I said, like Grand Theft Auto was the first thing where I would just like, that's all I thought about. Like I would think about Overwatch when I wasn't playing it. And it was, that was the big one. That was like
God damn it, Josh.
modern gaming.
You should have
turning
fucking played
point.
WoW. You needed to play WoW. You God damn it.
I missed the train.
I
dog.
wanted to bring it up.
I missed the boat on
You
that
didn't miss
one.
the train so much as you had more of a life than we did.
Yeah.
And I like mildly jokingly, but like you got a lot more entertainment out of non-virtual and non-fantastical realms than we did. So our late teenagehood was you kind of
drifting in and
back
out,
and forth
yeah.
between wanting to hang out with us and being like, okay, but I also want to like touch grass. So you did, right?
I offered to buy this guy a computer so he would play WoW with us. And he's like, nah.
If he played WoW, he'd be an accountant at fucking Washington Federal right now. You would be hating yourself. But you'd know Excel really well. Mild non sequitur, we do want to touch on that. Another thing that you youngsters don't have to deal with is the fucking pathos that is lost internet friends. I think I have made and lost more internet friends that some of them are still alive out there that we'll never meet again than I've known in my real life. One always comes to mind, this guy named Kevin. I was playing Dungeon Siege 2 online, and he was slightly older than me, and we played together, and we never really talked much about our home lives, and we played for like a year straight. And then either I installed the game or something happened, and he's just gone. This guy, I'm never going to meet him again, right? But we were friends. We talked every day. And you kind of brought that up, like with you having a group of people in Overwatch that now they're, mildly drifted away, non sequitur. But, with today's, you can have friends lists and Steve, and, we talked about Colin the other day, a friend of ours. He says he's still on Steam. I'm like, that's bullshit. And I screenshotted his old Steam account, which apparently he's using a new one, but it said last online 3,654 days ago, But what I think is interesting, because I was never really cognizant of this, is this recent switch from you playing the more mainline games to switching to PC games. I know that with our friend Egregious in chat, you became quite a historical.
I'm a big paradox. Big paradox. Like that fit right into like
early 20s. You got really big into history. So I think Justin really helped you get into that idea of these 4X games and historical games. But what was your first PC game? Do you remember? Even if it wasn't your PC, was there a game that like you remember like in your early nascent PC years where you're like, I could see myself playing this? Or
trying to think
why do you think? I think what Josh brings to this is this idea that while we might have tenure, there are still games we missed out on. And the style of games and what you enjoy, Josh is on just like a different branch. Yep. We're converging now that he's playing PC games and he's getting to experience all the woes and pros of PC gaming. But it's been really interesting to watch him kind of.
I think probably the first game I played on a PC was Diablo 2 at your house. Because like my dad, we had a computer, and my dad played a game a lot, but it was like a fantasy text game. He still plays that fucking game a lot, actually. It's like called Gemstone 3 or something like that.
Okay.
But it's like a sword and sorcery text fantasy game.
Is it like a mud or
Gemstone 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mud.
Cool.
Yeah.
But so I remember my dad, like, that's like,
at least
when I ever like think back, like, it was like, oh, good, my dad's playing his fucking game, so I can just be unfucking noticed.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I remember my dad playing that a lot, and like, on occasion when he wasn't on the computer, there was like those like flash games before they were flash games, playing a bit of those. But yeah, definitely, like, I feel like Diablo 2 was probably like my first like true PC gaming experience.
Yeah.
That's kind of a fun one to start on.
If all y'all want to know what we mean by flash games before flash games, Google image search Winged Warrior. This is the game I sunk hundreds of hours into, and there's no reason. Oh God, don't tell me I can play it. I'll fucking get sucked into it.
Goddamn, dude, yep. We got
Winged
Starship
Warrior,
Troopers.
and the demo for Winged Warrior 2 was on the AOL 2.0 disc. Not the full game, mind you. Just like the first couple levels.
Yeah.
Hundreds of hours. I just play it over and over again.
Yeah.
It was like 2 levels of an RPG, and you just keep playing it because you did. Yeah. Right? It's crazy.
Dude, I mean, let's go back to early PC days, because we've talked a lot about like AAA titles on console, right? Or what you would call AAA now. Back then, it was just video games.
Yeah.
I remember
indie scene didn't exist outside of the PC realm.
Yeah.
There was just AAA games for consoles.
I remember playing Commander Keen at your house.
Commander Keen.
Played a lot of Commander Keen.
Yeah.
That might have been. I mean, I don't remember my first. Like, I was playing games before I could develop permanent memories.
Yeah.
So some of these games that I've played, I maybe sometimes have a vague recollection of, but more often than not, like the earliest PC games, I don't remember. I remember big time 1996 Diablo, the first Diablo. Your mom shit herself over that game.
Last night, after talking to somebody about Diablo 4, I reinstalled Diablo and Hellfire, and I got the dark mod back from like 1998, and I was playing Diablo last night.
Yeah, dude.
That's how
shit holds up.
How like insidious that game is in my experience.
Yeah.
And like I was playing, it's like, oh yeah, and like this particular mod is good, but like it still has a 640 by 480 resolution.
Yeah.
The first hour, I was like, oh God, can I do this? And then an hour later, I saw the Butcher's Chamber, and I got that same tingle of fear running down my spine. Just seeing the pixels out of the corner of my eye, I was like, oh fuck, there it is.
I'm still scared of the Butcher.
It's just
instilled permanent fear in me. Fresh meat. You hear that door creak the first time, and those words uttered the first time, and then you die.
Yeah,
like you did not beat the Butcher on your first try.
I remember the first time I heard. It's like that's how iconic games were back then to our childhood. It's these permanent. What was it? Core Memories? Was that Pixar movies? Yeah. The fear sphere.
Dude, still to this day, one of the scariest things to ever happen to me. Like, I played a lot of Resident Evil games early on, and Resident Evil came out when we were young. Those were early PlayStation games.
I never really played Resident Evil. I mostly watched you played it from what I remember.
My introduction was a little bit into this series because I got my PlayStation came late. I got my PlayStation. Now we're going to talk about some more formative memories. Final Fantasy VII, Jesus, that was my life for a while, and that was my life because I had no alternative. Mm-hmm. When I got my PlayStation, it was another summer earning money all summer. Birthday came along, my dad took me down to Walmart because they had the original PlayStation still in stock, and Final Fantasy VII had only been out for a little while. I'd played it at your house for a little bit, and revolutionary. We had never seen anything like it.
No.
I mean, the world hadn't, right?
3D cutscenes and fucking polygons and shit.
It changed the face of video games. What was to be expected in RPGs. It quite literally defined a genre for the time, and you felt it. Like when you first started that game up, and the soundtrack started, and the train came to a stop.
It's gonna make my tears,
dude,
well up.
Well, I really implore you to play Remake because boy, oh boy,
I don't know if I can handle it.
You get those feels all over again,
Yeah.
And maybe even harder this time because you've got nostalgia mixed in.
Yeah.
But after having seen that, because I was an N64 guy, N64 to death, like because that was, I mean, console wars were fucking real back then.
Oh yeah.
I praise the N64. I would never touch a dirty PlayStation. Final Fantasy VII changed that big time.
Yeah.
And so I spent all summer working toward getting the PlayStation. So my dad would buy me Final Fantasy VII, and I got there. He took me down on my birthday to go pick up the PlayStation. We picked up Final Fantasy VII, the non-Game of the Year edition, which I still have somewhere.
Oh, lucky.
Well, it's open, so it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
But and you know whatever. But what I didn't factor into the cost,
Yeah, I remember this.
and what my dad could not afford at the time, was a memory card. I had to leave Final Fantasy VII running in my PlayStation for over a year,
24/7.
24/7. Because I wasn't doing any more work. There was no
Yeah.
work. The memory card didn't matter.
I have the game.
The
I have
reason-
the thing.
The reason I could make the definitive guide to Final Fantasy VII is because every time I died, I had to start the game over again. So I got to experience, especially the Midgar section,
Yeah.
probably thousands of times, and that's no joke. I mean, the elevator fight with the I can't remember the name of the monster right now, but
Scorpion guy.
no, it was the giant machine with the two chain guns for arms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, fighting that, I died probably 20 or 30 times before I came up with a good way to kill it. Because you also have to remember, in 1997, I was fucking 9.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old.
Little baby.
So formulating how I was going to kill this thing in the summer of 97 was like impossible. I didn't have the brain to do it yet. Like I did not have a frontal cortex that had started developing yet. So going into this with any kind of strategy was new, right? So I had to play that game, over and over and over. I died during the Sephiroth fights and had to restart my game.
No, thank you.
So, and that's how hardcore I was for about 2 years. Now, eventually I did get a multi-page memory card, which made me feel like a fucking badass because then I had a save for every save point in Final Fantasy VII. So I could continue making my definitive guide to Final Fantasy VII. That all said, another like hugely monumental, formative gaming moment for me. Gaming is like coded into our DNA. I feel like,
Yeah.
at this point, we were born to play these games. We found our niche early, and that's what happened, right? It wasn't as much a hobby as it was like immediately a lifestyle, especially for Nick and I. And then Josh is getting into that now. He's a late bloomer.
That's all I fucking do now.
He's a late bloomer, and he regrets it because because he knows a life otherwise. But where there's girls and money and fun, but I feel like our kindredship with video gaming as a whole and our experiences in chasing those experiences again makes us qualified to do a video game podcast, right? Where we mostly bring you the news, but we also bring you our banter. Like I think more importantly than just delivering you news is talking about this stuff in depth, whether it be theorizing rumors or just this general discussion about a topic. I think that's relatively important if you're in the zeitgeist, and I also consider it entertaining myself. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, I brought this up on the balcony and reiterated on a bit. There's people out there who play games now, but as of just 10, 15 years ago, there's people who just didn't play games.
Yeah.
And the concept isn't so unfathomable to me from the sense of how could you not play games so much as it's an entire form of media.
Yeah.
To me, it's like if someone tells me back in my early 20s or God forbid, like high school, they didn't play games. I'm like, it's like someone saying they've never seen a movie before.
Yeah.
Or they've never read a book or they've never heard a song. And it was so like non-conducive to me that people could go day to day without experiencing these worlds that were video games.
Yeah.
So, nowadays, after having played so many games, I use the analogy of like Red Letter Media on YouTube, these people who've watched probably tens of thousands of movies. It doesn't necessarily mean like we could make a great game because that's a whole set of skills, but really fucking good at knowing what is a good game and what isn't and why, So when new games come out and we're talking about them here on the podcast, we're not talking from a platform of superiority, no signature look Count Dooku bullshit, so much as a knowledge base of 30 years of games.
Yeah, we have experience.
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds,
Yeah.
we are experienced gamers.
I kind of pride myself. If I could meet somebody and talk with them for 10 minutes, I could probably recommend them a game that they would love just based off of a little knowledge of what they enjoy in life that's not even entirely related to games.
I'm going to change my answer. The first game I played on the PC was StarCraft.
Ooh, that's solid.
That's because
whole
all of a sudden
conversation,
I just remembered like Black Sheep Wall. Just like all of a sudden like those started.
Seawall,
Yeah.
All those things. There's so many games that like you talk about these times you forget. Oh yeah, how do we not mention Diablo or StarCraft or Warcraft or
How have we talked about the N64 at length and I haven't brought up Jet Force Gemini?
or fucking Mario?
Yeah.
or Mario 64,
Yeah.
right? Which is just
Yeah.
revolutionary. But we've watched games go from being like a thing like, in grade school, a thing that not everybody did. Like plenty of people didn't play games. It was, maybe, you play it over at a friend's house, but there were plenty of people that I knew that growing up that just didn't have video game things because they didn't want them. Now, like you said, now the idea of someone not liking video or not playing a video game, it's like not having heard a song.
Yeah.
Like, where have you been your entire life? And that's, I don't know. It's really weird to watch it go from, I don't know, video games for consoles were a thing. It was released a few a year, to this whole as a service for money. And like you said, it really used to be like a piece of art because it took a fucking year and a half to fucking make. And,
You go back and you look at interviews from devs at 3D Realms and you're like, those guys were like insanely passionate about the work that they were doing. They were coding engines because they weren't satisfied with the current engines that were available. They needed to make a new engine so they could create the game that they wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like you didn't have Unreal Engine 5 where everybody this season is going to be making now I don't undervalue the importance of something like that. But it's like we went from a space that was always about innovation to a space that is always about iteration.
No, and not just innovation, but innovation through artistry and storytelling and completeness. Like it was game. I mean, again, just not to wax poetic or whatever, but you used to buy a game, it was a whole game.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's just so watching video games transition and change into a media form, like a straight up media form. It's weird, man.
It went from being very niche and almost frowned upon. Like gaming was for the lazy. Gaming was for the weirdos. It was for
especially
nerds.
during the 90s. It's going to make you violent.
Brains.
Yeah,
it's right in your brain. Go outside.
100%. To being the most consumed form of entertainment. It's the largest form of entertainment as far as
Makes more
as
money
far as
than
dollars.
almost every other form of media combined.
It does, almost. Yeah. It's crazy how it's gone from like as niche as something could be, especially with the smaller games, like sharing shareware, like back then we were fucking weirdos for burning discs for Diablo 1, right? Like nobody else was doing that. To the point where like now everybody has played the most modern games.
Yeah.
And on a like a straight up global scale too. It's
Universally accepted.
Yeah, it used to be like in the 90s, it was like Japan and America that played video games, right? Essentially. I mean, I'm sure other
Europe
did.
did.
Europe did, sure.
They were solid, yeah.
But now it's a worldwide thing, you know.
You know, we mentioned that, you know, games seem to be going south, and to keep things from getting too dour, and this is the thing I harp all the time, is that sphere of innovation and not iteration you mentioned still exists.
Yeah.
But they exist in indie games.
Yes.
And if anything, if I was, you know, held at freaking golden gunpoint to say, what am I here on this podcast to do, is to spread the word to as many people about the sphere that is indie games. And I don't necessarily mean like Doki Doki Literature Club and shit that's like niche but funny. I mean, just non-major AAA, AA games. They're, you know, it's so easy to look at all the big games and think like gaming is just for money and all that shit. And that's true if you just look at that slice of the pie.
Yeah.
But there are so many games out there, and it blows me away that people will just spend so much of their time, years of their life, modders out into the game with no goal other than to make the experience they want to have. I tried getting back into RimWorld the other night. I spent 7 hours getting together a mod pack, and I got 273 mods, and maybe 30 of the mods were paid for to be developed because somebody wanted it, so they paid somebody to develop. All the other ones, just people just making mods to fix things, making mods to add things. You know, some of these mods came out in 2018, and they're updating them this day for no reason other than the love of the fucking game. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't think video games as a source of art or experience or imagination or storytelling are going anywhere. It's just going to shift and change. Too many people know how to make games now. It's too much in the zeitgeist. You're not going to get rid of it. There's always probably going to be this AAA giant slice of the pie that is there about to make money. And that is only going to get more and more condensed and processed as time goes on. You know, the addition of gambling mechanics into games and stuff like that, it's not going to slow down. We might have a bubble where it pops one day and people get finally fed up because the average gamer realizes they've been hoodwinked for so many years. But even that doesn't happen. Like, get a PC, you know, get a fucking laptop.
And for a lot of these, for a lot of indie games, you don't have to have like an incredible rig.
No, not at all. No. And they're cheap, and sometimes they're even free. Like, you know, one of the games that in the last 10 years I've played the most of, I'm nearing 1,000 hours, was $25.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all I've paid. And, you know, you ask anybody in any hobby, motorcycling, underwater basket weaving, hey, did you spend $25 on your hobby and spend 1,000 fucking hours enjoying it?
Right.
No, there's nothing like that. You know, like I don't even think there's a song most people listen to for 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
You know,
and dude, even if you want to go hard in PC gaming and just like hit the road running, to start, the investment does not have to be huge. I know it's like, you know, if you were to ask me what kind of rig should I build, I'd say you want to look around $1,500, you know, depending on what game you play or you're like interested in to start.
Yeah. How much is a motorcycle, right?
Well, here's the thing. Also, consider buying used. Really do that. Go to Facebook Marketplace, look up gaming computer, and you'll find them for sale for $600. And you know, it might be 4 or 5 years old, but that will get you in, right? And like Nick right now is playing with a computer that is more than 4 or 5 years old. We have an 8-year-old processor in that thing.
Any problems with the games that run?
No, and you're playing modern titles.
Apex, the newest Halo, and No Man's Sky are the only games that come to mind that I had choppy problems with.
Yeah,
and I don't play any of those games.
Right.
So considering that consoles now are anywhere between $500 and $600 anyways, the barrier to entry to PC really is not that big. You know,
more often than not, you probably already have a computer sitting in the corner that barely gets used, except for when you need to do emails and whatever. If you want to get into the gaming space, just swap that out with something from Facebook Marketplace and call it a day. Get Steam, download some demos. You can go to steampowered.com/demos and just try stuff, man. Shit's free. Just jump in some demos. There's even AAA titles up on Steam right now with demos. System Shock has a fucking free demo out. You can play the first little bit of System Shock. Just came out.
And if Andy can play the first level of Final Fantasy VII for 100,000 hours, you can play a demo of a game, right?
Yep.